Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this 15th day of June. Hey, are we getting ready for the end of financial year? Scary, isn't it? It's just around the corner for us. And today is 8 degrees and mostly sunny. So it was cool this morning, but it doesn't feel, that chilly because the chill factor is probably not in the air. But right now, let's go down with the news for today, and we'll finish off with some of the functions and events taking place. Here's the news in brief, courtesy of ABC.
Federal police have stopped more than $1.5 billion worth of methamphetamine hitting the streets in one of the nation's largest ever drug busts. The AFP says 6 tonnes of the drugs had been hidden in canola oil bottles destined for Melbourne, the equivalent of 19 million individual hits. One shipment was confiscated in Australia and 3 others in Canada. 6 men have been charged following several raids across Melbourne. Independent Senator Lydia Thorpe will make a statement in the Senate today after she made explosive claims yesterday under parliamentary privilege. She accused Liberal Senator David Van of harassing and sexually assaulting her. Senator Van immediately denied the allegation, labelling it a disgusting statement. Hours later, Senator Thorpe returned to the chamber to withdraw the comments in order to comply with parliamentary rules, but promised to speak further today. At least 79 migrants have drowned and many more are missing after an overloaded fishing boat capsized and sank off southern Greece in one of Europe's deadliest shipwrecks this year. Authorities say about 100 people have been rescued so far, but it's unclear how many more are missing, with reports that hundreds of passengers may have been on board. And thousands have gathered in Milan for the state funeral of former Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi, who died earlier this week at the age of 86. The ceremony for the controversial billionaire took place in the Gothic Duomo Cathedral, with his ashes to be placed in a marble mausoleum at his villa in Arcore.
There you are, up to date on Australian Indian Radio. Right now, we go to the next news, which is the first big battery at Australian coal site goes live.
At Hazelwood in Victoria's Latrobe Valley, it's out with the old and in with the new. A 150 megawatt battery built in the shadow of a coal-fired power station.
The commissioning of this battery represents a key milestone in this journey and marks an important step in the transition of the Latrobe Valley from a thermal energy power to a clean energy power provider.
Charged by the rooftop solar systems on 30,000 Victorian homes, the battery, which covers an area equivalent to 3 football fields, will store about an hour of energy. The power station it's replacing generated more than 10 times that much, but it's being lauded as a first step.
We can comfortably at least double the size of the battery, and we can do that relatively quickly.
It's privately funded with no government money involved. But Victoria's Energy Minister says it's part of a long-term plan to improve reliability of the state grid and eventually reduce power prices.
It is important that we don't just sit around waiting for old technology to disappear, close down, but we actually get in front of it and make sure that we have more than sufficient supply to meet our needs. That's what keeps downward pressure on prices.
This battery is a huge milestone for the Latrobe Valley's transition away from coal-fired power generation. 120 people helped build the battery, but locals are waiting to see if battery storage will provide enough long-term jobs for the region.
I think there will be a lot of jobs during construction, but how many jobs of long term, which we really need to for the transition to happen properly.
It's the first battery to be installed on an old power station site in Australia, and it likely won't be the last. Beck Simmons.
So there you are, and that is good news. Well, there's always the two sides of the equation. It will become efficient, so it might not need that many people to run it. To build it, of course, yes, there was a lot of labour that was required. So, do we go towards just looking at employment, or shall we look at energy efficiency and also the climate and the climate change, which has been a big agenda item for many governments around the world, and the climate change that's been tackled with that. So where do you draw the line? Where is that balance? Right now, let's go to New South Wales, where the council wants to cap higher taxes on holiday rentals.
For reasons that are probably fairly obvious if you look at what's behind me, at certain times of the year, thousands of people want to come to this place and they are willing to pay top dollar for somewhere to stay. So if you own an investment property, that can be a fairly lucrative business. But what that means is there are fewer permanent rentals on the market. So when those visitors arrive, they expect someone to be there to make their coffee or pour their beer. But if you're working in retail or hospitality, it's really difficult to find somewhere affordable to live in this part of the world, and that's the problem the council's confronting.
Yeah, and it seems that council really didn't have to look too far to see examples of how this crisis is hurting local residents.
Yeah, it sure didn't. Actually, one of the local councillors, Salma Balson, was telling me this week that since the floods last year, she has had to move her family 24 times. And a bunch of those occasions were because the place where she was staying had a pre-existing holiday booking. Also at the council meeting I attended recently, one of the people that spoke there was a woman called Sarah Jane McGrath. Now, she's been living in her van for the last 3 years since she lost her job during the COVID pandemic, and she had some interesting things to say about the situation.
Don't have a job and you can't make ends meet, then you're unable to afford the increased cost for either a room or a house. We've got a lot of hospitality around here. Those people are now having to leave because they cannot afford the houses because they're getting less than 20 hours in their shifts per week, and the cost of living goes up and the wage does not.
She really just sets out the difficulties there so eloquently, Bruce. Now, the Byron Council initially wanted a 90-day cap, didn't they? But then the state government set up an independent panel to recommend that 60-day limit, which is what they're going to try out. What's the tourism industry had to say about it?
Well, there was an industry lobby that mounted a pretty aggressive campaign about the idea of any sort of cap being imposed on short-term holiday letting, but that approach seems to have tempered recently. I had a chat to a bloke called Colin Hussey, who's the CEO of a business called A Perfect Stay, and he seemed to think that the time was right for a sensible compromise.
What we do want to do is address the affordable housing issue in the region. So restrict the number of full-time homes down, but let them do a 365. But anybody else that wants to do it, 60 days is a good number to stop them moving across into full-time holiday letting. And I think that's probably a really good compromise.
So that's Colin Hussey. He's a spokesman for the short-term holiday letting industry. And Madeline, I should point out that the council will be able to consider exemptions on a case-by-case basis. No one's suggesting that this will be a blanket 60-day annual cap on short-term holiday letting, but what it is designed to do is to get some of those homes in the more residential areas back into the permanent rental market, and it's now up to the council to convince the state government that it can implement and manage that system.
I don't agree with that. I'd say that let the economics of the whole situation take place, meaning the supply and demand. If there is a demand for that and if people are willing to pay that, so be it. So be it. Don't restrict all these little things, things that had made Australia what Australia was, going out and like that. So, just in terms because of someone feels marginalized and whatever, just because to fit in with someone, it's in holiday area, people want to come in there for their holidays, and people who want to live there permanently, which is good, that is their choice, but of course everything comes at a price. So if you want to live in places like, and also looking at the floods, I really think that councils and governments should rethink of giving building approvals for places where it floods, and of course not that 1 in 100-year flood, but floods that are very frequent. So those areas, they should not just leave it as parklands or something like that. Do not build on those. Do not build. There's enough land in Australia in different areas. So look outside that. I know it might be hard with this prime because it's the location close to other things like that. But If you look at the devastation and that report before where the lady had to evacuate about 8 times or something like that, wouldn't it be time to move on? Isn't there a message in that? If it's a 1 in a 100-year flood, I would understand. But right now, let's go to our next news where there is outpouring of grief over that bus accident.
3 patients have been discharged in the past day, leaving 10 survivors in hospital, all in a stable condition. Here at the crash site, traffic controls are in place to allow people to lay tributes safely. A public vigil is planned in the coming weeks so the community can come together to grieve and lean on one another.
Lining up to pay their respects, the Premier, local mayors and MPs paused to reflect.
Our community continues to heal. It's going to be a very long healing process.
Flowers, notes and a teddy bear were among the tributes laid near the Greta roundabout, where a coach packed with wedding guests rolled on Sunday night. 10 people were killed.
I think we just want to show our support for them and know that they are all in our thoughts.
The state government has donated $100,000 to a fund for the victims' families to be run by Rotary.
There's 2 young children who have lost their parents. They're going to need ongoing support. There are just so many people hurting in our community.
Health officials visited colleagues of Newcastle doctor Rebecca Mullen, who was among those killed.
They're feeling very raw, so it will take them some time to recover.
The Queensland Premier paid tribute to 4 of the victims who had lived or were living in her state.
Our hearts go out to the families and friends that have been impacted.
5 of those who died were members of the Singleton Roosters AFL club. As a mark of respect, all Hunter and Central Coast games this weekend have been cancelled or postponed.
Maitland Saints players rolled up their sleeves to help replenish blood stocks.
Just trying to boost numbers in the local community for blood donations for events like this.
We have some players and supporters and everyone in the community that feels a little hopeless and a bit empty and wanting to do whatever they can.
Filling blood bags in the hope of saving lives after losing so many. Alexander Lewis.
So there you go. The wounds are pretty raw at the moment and it will take a while to heal. And the least that you can do is pay respect, and which is been happening. And it is always good to see that our community does come together in times like this. But it's a rather unfortunate incident that has happened there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now let's go to regional New South Wales, where there is struggling with the increased cost of living.
It's a Saturday afternoon and Auntie Dulcie Nanala is preparing dinner for her friends and family. This is one of her favourite spots, a 15-minute drive through the bush from Balgo, where she's lived all her life.
This dam was when Father Maguire was the priest, the first priest we had in this mission.
He built it, did he?
Yeah, he made this for kids.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. When mission days.
On the menu today, kangaroo tails bought from a shop and a couple of bush turkeys that have been shot.
What's bush turkey taste like?
Tastes like a chicken.
Hunting and gathering bush tucker is a way for people in Balgo to keep their food costs down.
This is how we do when we take few kids out to share what we eat, what we kill. You know, like a turkey or like a kangaroo. How many kids?
10.
How many kids? Any more?
10.
One more?
When it comes to buying groceries, there aren't a lot of options. There's only one shop in town.
It costs a lot of money to keep buying food for each day. What's in the morning, what's in the lunch, what for dinner.
Is the cost of things getting more and more?
Yes, it's more, a little bit high.
Dulcie tops up her pension by selling artwork.
Every fortnight I get My disability pension is $400. And I have to buy food and a power card to keep me going till Friday when my painting money comes in.
We're a one-stop shop here for everything. We sell everything, white goods, electronics, as well as we're the only place in town where you can buy food.
Balgo is in Western Australia's remote Kimberley region, on the edge of the Tanami Desert. Store manager Peter Klein says most of his stock comes 1,500 kilometres from Darwin.
Freight costs on average is about 30%, plus then there's always a fuel levy on top of that. That's currently at 25%. That varies depending on the price of diesel.
And that fluctuates given what's happening geopolitically?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's it can go up higher. I've seen it as high as 35%.
The shop is small and independent, meaning it has to pay more compared to the major supermarkets.
Any small business is tough. Everything comes back to volumes of scale. If we were doing a lot more in sales, then we could negotiate for stronger trading terms.
They sell fruit, vegetables and meat to the community for the cost it takes to buy and freight it to Balgo, meaning the business loses money after factoring in other expenses like wages and electricity.
We sell almost 8 times more confectionery than what we do fruit and veg.
What's your number one product?
Number one selling product? Coca-Cola 1250ml. We sell more of that than anything. Tobacco makes up 1/3 of our sales. 1/3 of our sales are in tobacco.
Residents of Balgo suffer from a high rate of chronic disease. Diabetes is common, and older community members often have to go live in bigger towns for dialysis.
Yeah, I've been grow up in Balgo eating bush tucker with all people. When they eat, people eat bush tucker, they all feel strong, healthy.
Eric Moura thinks the shop should only sell healthy food.
We need to stop the coke, not to selling coke here in the shop too. We need to try to get good drinks, no sugar, making people sick from the coke, like diabetes, all that, too much sugar.
The business is owned by the local Wirramanu Aboriginal Corporation, which has a board of elected Indigenous residents. The CEO says there would be little appetite for restricting what's sold there.
It's a supply and demand business, so we need to meet those needs of our community. We provide a lot of information around nutrition, but it's an essential need of the community to provide for all of the conveniences that you would see in any other township or city in Australia.
But Auntie Dulcie says the government should be doing more to help, like subsidising the cost of supplying remote stores in remote areas.
It should. The freight from the truck and from the planes, the government should help.
That idea was rejected by a parliamentary inquiry in 2020.
We thought there was no guarantee that the subsidies would be passed on. In fact, they could end up inflating the cost.
The committee's other ideas to reduce prices in remote communities were either rejected or merely noted by the then Morrison government. The Labor government says it's expecting a draft strategy report on remote food pricing later this year, but so far no action has been taken. For Auntie Dulcie, the day ends with another cookout for her family. Tonight it's a hearty stew with damper.
I cook what I cook for supper. I got my grandkids around and my sons and daughters around.
And how many people would that be, every day that you need to feed?
Probably 10 or 11 grandkids and older ones. They see me sitting next to the fire cooking. I want my kids to be happy.
So there you go. Everyone wants their kids to be happy. The good old life in the bush. Well, if you look at that, there is a bit of a fusion of the plastics coming in and the aluminium foil coming in as well. And rather than just the normal bush tucker going to the shops to get things as well. So, it's a balancing act now between, the modern diet and the good old bush tucker method. So it's a balancing act, and that is especially the Coke taking its toll on the diabetics. The rate of diabetics that is getting high up there, but it's very easy to get addicted to things like that. Well, and the shopkeepers, the rule is that, if it's available to every other Australian, why not that community? So it is, as I mentioned, that it is the balancing act, trying to balance between the lifestyle that used to be and of the current lifestyle of every other Australian. You should not be discriminated. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have for you today. In this segment, let's finish up with the functions and events. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have time for you in this segment. It's been wonderful having your company today, and I hope you enjoyed the choice of the news that we selected for our show and the commentaries that were provided by Australian Indian Radio. Well, until tomorrow, it's goodbye from us.